Hi there, I'm Matt with State of Flux here with a retrospective review. I'm going to do like a crash course through the Spider-Man movies. As of now, I'm only going to do the live-action ones, and I'm going to kind of buzz over the MCU ones when we get there, but the new Spider-Man trailer, Spider-Man No Way Home, really impressed me. Got me excited, got me pumped for this movie that is tying in, it looks like, some of the old lore from the previous Spider-Man incarnations. So I thought, what better time to go back and revisit what once was. So, the first in this series, which I hope to bring to you every couple of days here leading up to the movie, is Spider-Man, Sam Raimi's 2002 masterpiece. I say masterpiece, and I genuinely mean it. This is one of the best comic book movies out there in that it really kind of established the groundwork with which most comic book adaptations operate from this movie forward. And this movie itself borrowed heavily from Richard Donner's first Superman movie. And there's a couple visual quotes in the film, Peter Parker running and busting out of his shirt to reveal the Spider-Man one underneath. There's a couple other visual quotes, not only in this film too, it happens in Spider-Man 2 as well. But anyway, Sam Raimi really knocked it out of the park. He had established himself as a schlock horror filmmaker, emerging out of the 80s into the 90s, and with the 90s he made a string of essentially comic book movies. He did Darkman, which was when he couldn't get the rights to Batman or the Shadow. He decided, hey, I'll make my own. So he made his own comic book movie, Darkman, which is really fun. I encourage you, especially if you like this, to check that one out. If you like this but want the sensibilities of Batman, check out Darkman. Excellent movie, Liam Neeson film from 1990 or so. And then he followed that up with Army of Darkness, which is the third chapter in his Evil Dead trilogy, but really feels like a comic book movie. It operates as a comic book movie. Ash is much more of a superhero, complete with superhero weapons and catchphrases and stuff like that, as he takes on the Army of the Dead. And then Raimi pivoted a little bit to become operate a little more as a serious filmmaker, making the excellent and incredibly underrated A Simple Plan from 1998, and he made one of my favorite movies of the 2000s with The Gift right before making this film. But this film sort of implemented everything that he had learned in his entire career. It seemed like it was all leading up to this movie, which he was like, he put it out there, and this genuinely is his master work. The film is good on multiple different levels. It really is the first MCU movie, if you want to look at it that way. There had been previous Marvel movies made before this one. The first X-Men movie, which is so embarrassed of being a comic book movie, it drops all color out of the picture, turned everything black and blue and gray. It doesn't have any of the characters really visibly looking anything like their comic book counterpart. And it doesn't have the tone or energy of a comic book. It is trying to be a realist kind of film. And that's not to say that X-Men isn't bad, but it's embarrassed of being a comic book movie. Before that, you got Blade, and Blade is fun, but Blade doesn't really feel like a comic book movie, and they don't really do anything to emphasize its comic book nature. They won't do that till the third Blade, which is kind of an embarrassment. And then before that, you have The Punisher and Captain America and just a handful of other. Howard the Duck is the first mainstream Marvel movie that was made. That one feels like a comic book movie, but that kind of cemented the tone that Marvel could not exist in the film world for over a decade. This film changes that. This film establishes what the tone of the MCU is, which is that it is funny, fun, spirited. It is brimming with action and spectacle, while also being emotionally resonant and character first. The important thing with this film, especially with this film, is that you like the characters. The whole film is written from the character perspective first. He's a superhero second, which is why he doesn't become that superhero. Spider-Man doesn't really Spider-Man until about an hour into the picture. He spends the first hour, you spend the first hour of this film with Peter Parker. And that's the other benefit of this film. It had something really interesting to say, and you will see this in the 3 Raimi-driven Spider-Man movies. They can each be broken down into a single word that the entire films operate on and based around the singular word. That word for this film is choice. This whole film hinges on choice and the choices we make. It even comes to the point where you have the villain at the end of the movie standing on the bridge holding the 2 separate obstacles for Spider-Man to pick to save and say, choose! And then he drops. Everything hinges on choice. And the theme of choice is strong throughout the entire film. We are shown Peter Parker. And he is gifted with great power and great responsibility for that power, which is a quote that I will dive into in a tiny bit. But he's given great power, and what he does is self-serving. He chooses to act in favor of himself and not necessarily others. And he learns quite swiftly the repercussions of such a choice. The whole film then kind of follows Peter Parker in his decisions of what he is going to do. Is he going to follow the thing that he wants to do, that he should do, that he doesn't know he needs to do? The whole film hinges on this. And quite brilliantly, so does the villain. The villain of this film is Green Goblin Norman Osborn, and he is presented as sort of a Gollum-like character. He Gollumed a whole, 7-8 months before Gollum actually would make his screen debut in Two Towers this same year. This film is filled with Willem Dafoe Golluming, and doing it quite exceptionally. But the whole time, you have essentially a villain who is a devil and an angel. Visual representation of a devil, and then the Willem Dafoe side of things where he wants to do good, he's trying to do good, and this is kind of a neat parallel to the Spider-Man Peter Parker character, where he's done something self-serving, but it ended horribly, and he's spending the rest of the film trying to make positive choices. And then you have a character who's being guided by a negative side of that same coin. I think it's just exceptionally well done. The screenplay of this film, written by David Koepp, who'd written Jurassic Park, the screenplay for the first Jurassic Park movie, which is exceptional. He also wrote one of my favorite movies from 1999 and should be on most people's top 10 lists, but sadly never is, and it makes me sad. Stir of Echoes. He's the writer and director of Stir of Echoes. Excellent film. If you have not seen that, it is one of the best thrillers you will ever watch. Watch that movie. Kevin Bacon is the bomb in that movie. But yeah, Stephen Cope wrote this movie. Cope, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. David Koepp. He wrote this film, and this is one of the strongest screenplays, I think. It gets a little muddled in that the film didn't probably have the budget it quite needed, but even still, the action and spectacle is really quite good. And I like how this film ends almost like a Western, in that you just have two men. It's not a big global conflict. It's between two men who are fist fighting in like a warehouse, a brick warehouse. And the small scale nature of the film doesn't not feel earned. It feels like you're so emotionally attached to both characters by that point, you don't care that it is literally a fist fight between the main character and the antithesis of said main character, duking it out with their fists. And it only lasts like just a couple minutes. It's not like a big long thing, yet you were so invested into the film and these characters by that point, it really works strongly. And that also goes to not only the screenplay, but the direction of the film. The direction of the film, center focusing everything from the character's perspective and trying to get you to understand even the bad guy. Raimi's focus on the characters is really, really strong and so well established. And he is genuinely the perfect choice. Sam Raimi has always been one of my favorite directors, but this movie is where he shines the most. It is like an almost perfect origin story. We haven't even talked about the casting. Tobey Maguire plays Peter Parker, and I think most people remember him as looking a little too old for the part. And yeah, everybody in this film definitely looks a little too old to play the part they're in, probably except for Mary Jane, who actually I think was 18 at the time. But go back and rewatch it, as I did just the other night. He doesn't look that young. He actually looks pretty age appropriate in this. He looks like he's about 18. But he's really, really good in the film. He captures the emotional side of things so well, and he has the window eyes where you can just funnel all of your energy into his eyes, and he's able to emote it at the screen just so elegantly. He's the perfect choice to play Peter Parker the way this movie needed to be told. He has a little bit of fun with it. He is perfectly, believably nerdy, and such a schlub of a character, but likable and earnest, and that's what Peter Parker, especially this incarnation of Peter Parker, needs. This another thing that people fault, I'm going to go back to the cast in a second. Some people fault this film for two reasons. One, Tobey Maguire is way too old to be Spider-Man. I kind of refute that. By the time he makes 2 and 3, yeah, he's kind of aged out of that, but he's also not in high school anymore, so it kind of works. People have to remember that, Peter Parker was only in high school for 42-ish issues of the comic book before he graduated and was in college. So now they're in issue 800 of this comic book series. Dude was only in high school for a minute amount of time. So drop that, people. The other thing people drop on this is that it's so separated from the comic book material. That is just patently not true. That is absolutely refuted by people who've actually read the comic books. This is very much the perfect incarnation of Spider-Man comics as they were in the 60s and very, very early 70s. And so much so that this actually quite adapts the night Gwen Stacy died, that storyline. Yeah, spoiler alert, Mary Jane is the stand-in for Gwen Stacy in this film, and spoiler alert, she survives, but it still ends with her falling, Peter having to catch her and stuff like that, using his rage of what happens to her and the fact that Goblin used her to get to him and break him in a fist fight inside of a brick building where the Green Goblin uses the glider and gets impaled on his own sword. That is absolutely everything established from that comic book. The end of this film is an examination, or a duplication of that story on film, just as the first half of this film is a duplication and perfect adaptation of the first ever Amazing Fantasy number 15 Spider-Man story. So this, when people say that this movie isn't close to the source material, what they're really, really talking about is the most minute thing, and that is that they used the simplified nature of having his webbing come out of his wrist rather than having him build his amazing science project that allows him to do that. That is the only thing they really changed in the adaptation. That, and they changed Gwen Stacy into Mary Jane. However, I will say that her character in this, shy of saying Tiger, and a couple of little moments that she has with Flash, really reads less as Mary Jane and more as Gwen Stacy. The way she plays it is very Gwen Stacy in those early comic books. Mary Jane was a fun party girl, always scratching and laughing kind of thing. And that's not really the MJ you get in this film, though that's not a bad thing. I think she is really quite good. Moving back into the cast, Kirsten Dunst is an incredibly underrated actress. She is so good and imbues so much life into this role that could be relatively lifeless if it was handled without care. And I think she put enough care and herself into it that it really soars. And for my money, she's the best counterpart out of all the ones that Spider-Man has had in any of the cinematic universes. She's really, really quite good and so lovely in this film, and just offers wonderful texture to the movie. Willem Dafoe is a mad genius, and as he is in every movie, and he is so good in this movie. And he, as most people will tell you, he reads better when he has his mask off than when he has his mask on. Not in love with the outfit. I've always thought it looked a little Power Rangers-y, and it is what it is, right? But something that they're embracing with the new movie, it looks like. But then the film has a bunch of amazing side performances, from the standard Sam Raimi cameos that you get with Bruce Campbell and Ted Raimi, his brother, as well as Lucy Lawless. The film has excellent performances from Rosemary Harris, who plays Aunt May, probably the most screen-accurate Aunt May from the comic books as depicted in the comic books on film. Easily she's the closest to the adaptation. And she was also in Sam Raimi's prior film, The Gift, as was J.K. Simmons. J.K. Simmons is the perfect J. Jonah Jameson. There's a reason only one person has ever played that character, and it's him, and that's because that was so perfect. There's nobody on this planet who could have done it as exceptionally as he does. For my money, that man was robbed of an Oscar that year, because he is just pitch perfect. And then you have Uncle Ben in this film is so incredibly strong. Just really a beautiful, beautiful performance, and one that is the entire film hinges on your reaction to him and his death. So yeah, I love this movie. Danny Elfman's score is one of the strongest scores for any superhero movie. Yeah, it reads a little Batman-y, but I mean, you only have so many sounds, right? And this one works. The horns, the emotion really plays throughout the whole film. The special effects, by and large, are really quite good, especially with Spider-Man swinging around. Where it's less good is when before he's in his regular Spider-Man suit, when he's in his homemade one. Some of those ones don't work so well, and whatnot, and the people disintegrating into bones always looked really hokey, I thought, even back then when this movie came out. But that last shot of Spidey swinging through the town and landing on the pole, that was quite ingenious. Beautifully rendered special effect. This film came out, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about this, shortly after 9/11, so the film was reshaped to take out the Twin Towers, and the very first trailer of this film was slung on the existence of the Twin Towers and the webbing that Spider-Man put in the middle of it to catch a helicopter and whatnot. But the good thing that came out of I don't want to say that. I'm going to backtrack there because I feel like I could be entering dangerous waters there. One of the film's benefits is how America responded to the horrific events of September 11th, which is that for a small period of time, there was extreme loyalty to people who were perceived as doing good to help others. And that reads through in this movie. Even though everybody's kind of shitting on poor Peter the whole film, the one thing that really, really quite works is that when Spider-Man is in the process of doing good, it happens with the cop who's like about to arrest him during the burning building, and then Spider-Man's like, I need to go in there because there's like a woman crying, and then he's like, I'll arrest you when you come back out, and he's like, I'm not coming out, Chief. And then the cop's like, all right, go in there. Like, the genuine like want to help others became like an emphasized thing throughout the film. And I think that really kind of works for this film in a weird way. An excellent example of this is in the final battle. Spider-Man has the option to choose Mary Jane or the thing full of kids. And Spider-Man doesn't always make the right choice. This is something going back to the theming. Spider-Man is given the choice to save the children or to save Mary Jane, and who does he go for first? He goes for Mary Jane. He still takes that self-serving thing. He's not always making the right choice, but he immediately goes down and is able to catch the kids, but he doesn't have a firm grasp on them. And what happens next? There's a couple of people on a boat who see what Spider-Man is doing, and he's like, hang in there, kid, we're coming! And they're there to try and help. And then what happens next? Green Goblin starts attacking, yada yada. But then the people of New York are there, and they have the really dopey line of like, you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us, that whole thing. That's a little cheesy, but I like the sentiment of people seeing somebody make a choice, clearly a good choice, trying to do good for the betterment of other people, and the towns need to help that person. The general feel you get of that is really, really quite strong, because it is so true to that moment in time. For a brief period, there was like great tragedy, the want to help, and then, you know, politics and horrible things and all that kind of stuff happened. But the film really did kind of work on that. I do like that Peter's constantly being asked to make choices and stuff like that, and that he chose Mary Jane over the kids and stuff like that. And that's because I think of what happened to Uncle Ben. Even though it was probably the wrong choice to immediately go for her rather than the kids, the quote-unquote right choice would be for the kids and then try to save her. Going for her first makes sense because from his perspective, he already lost somebody because of himself once that was a personal blow. This would be the second. So that's why he goes for her before swinging back at the kids. And that really quite plays well for me. As I say, I think this movie is fantastic. Yeah, there's some criticisms I could make about the film. The fact that most people of color in this film are not depicted positively. You're introduced to like a couple of Latin people, and their entire role in this film is to try and gang rape MJ. Not a good look. You have like two African American characters with speaking roles, and one is the teacher who's overly harsh. And really just trying to rein in the kids. So, I mean, I don't blame him. But he's just kind of like a weirdly sinister teacher that's like not played... he's played overly sinister for how he's presented in the film. And then you have a minor cameo of Octavia Spencer, who, when Peter Parker is signing up to be the human spider. That's it. That's your... representation in this film, and that's kind of unfortunate. The whole damsel in distress thing, Also, should thank God we're aging away from that, but you still get it in most of these Spider-Man movies, and it looks like in the trailer for the new one they're doing the damsel in distress thing yet again. But that's something that kind of plagues the Raimi trilogy, is they really hinge on playing MJ as just merely a damsel in distress, and that's pretty disappointing. But other than that, the film largely works and holds up, and I think is a great snapshot in time, purely evocative of 60s comic book like nostalgia. This movie is great. It's an easy 4 stars for me. One of my all-time favorite comic book movies. Not my favorite, but it's really, really quite good. As far as origin stories go, this is easily going to be in the top 5, probably in the 3 or 4 spot. So yeah. Up next will be a discussion of Spider-Man 2. And I look forward to that. Last thing I want to mention is the iconic shot, the smooch, the upside down smooch, is amazing. Gorgeous, beautifully shot, absolutely love it. But once you read the stories of how uncomfortable that was to shoot for both people, you can't not unsee how veiny his neck is, because he's like, all the blood is rushing to his head, and the fact that all the water's slipping under his mask, so he is literally drowning as that is being shot. Kind of ruins the scene for you, but it's still a gorgeous shot nonetheless. One of the best, most iconic comic book moments ever put to film comes from that. That shot probably stands alongside like the Amazing Avengers circle shot. So yeah. Anyway, Spider-Man, great film. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thanks for watching. Peace.